My name is Amelia Carter, I'm 28, and I work as a financial analyst. I thought I was marrying the man of my dreams, but the moment I said yes, all hell broke loose. Secrets, lies, and a plan to destroy me were already in motion, and God had to intervene to reveal the truth. The night he proposed to me, I believed my life was finally beginning. If someone had told me that accepting that ring would unleash betrayal, secrets, and the darkest battle of my life, I would have laughed in disbelief. But what I didn't know then was this. That proposal would trigger a chain of events so devastating that it would nearly destroy me. And yet, it would also become the moment God began exposing a truth no one thought I would ever discover. I still remember that evening with painful clarity. The sky was painted with soft orange and purple as the sun dipped below the horizon. A warm breeze moved through the trees in the park where Daniel had asked me to meet him. At the time, I thought it was just another romantic date. Daniel had always been thoughtful like that. We had been together for almost 3 years. He was charming, attentive, and the kind of man who made everyone feel comfortable around him. My friends adored him. My church family respected him. Even my skeptical older brother had once said, "If any man deserves my sister, it's Daniel." I believed Daniel was my answered prayer. I had met him during a charity fundraiser organized by our church. He had volunteered to help serve food to homeless families that evening. I remember watching him from across the room. The way he knelt beside a little boy and helped him tie his shoes. The patience in his voice. The warmth in his smile. Something about him felt safe. Later that night he introduced himself. "Hi," he said with a shy grin. "I'm Daniel. I think we've been working the same side of this room for 2 hours and haven't said a word." I laughed. That was the beginning of everything. Over the next 3 years, Daniel became my entire world. He brought flowers to my job just because he knew I'd had a stressful day. He prayed with me before bed. He held my hand during church services and whispered encouragement whenever I felt discouraged. "God brought you into my life," he once told me. "And I'm never letting you go." At the time, I believed every word. So when he texted me that Friday afternoon asking if we could meet at the park where we had our first real conversation, I didn't think anything unusual about it. But when I arrived, I realized something was different. The entire pathway leading to the lake was lined with small candles. Soft music played from a speaker hidden somewhere nearby. My heart began pounding. "Daniel?" I called out. Then I saw him. He stepped out from behind a large oak tree wearing the same navy blue suit he had worn on our very first date. In his hands was a small velvet box. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. He walked toward me slowly, his eyes filled with emotion. "Emily," he said softly. My knees nearly gave out. Then he dropped to one knee. Right there beside the lake where we had spent so many evenings talking about our dreams. "From the moment I met you," he said, "I knew God had placed you in my life for a reason." Tears blurred my vision. "You are my best friend, my peace, my greatest blessing." His voice trembled as he opened the velvet box. Inside was the most beautiful ring I had ever seen. "Emily," he whispered, "will you marry me?" My heart exploded with joy. Everything I had ever prayed for, every dream I had about love and family, it all felt like it was happening in that single moment. "Yes," I cried. "Yes, of course I will." Daniel slipped the ring onto my finger and stood, pulling me into a tight embrace. For a moment, the world felt perfect. I didn't know that just beyond the trees, someone else had been watching the entire proposal. And judging by the expression on her face, my happiness was the last thing she wanted. After the proposal, Daniel suggested we celebrate with dinner. "I made reservations at your favorite restaurant," he said. The evening felt like something out of a romantic movie. The staff congratulated us. Daniel held my hand across the table like he never wanted to let go. I couldn't stop staring at the ring. "This is really happening," I whispered. Daniel smiled. Yes, he said. It's finally happening. But something about the way he said it felt strange. I brushed the feeling aside. I was too happy to question anything. Later that night, I rushed to my best friend Rachel's apartment to share the news. Rachel and I had been inseparable since college. She was the first person I wanted to tell. When she opened the door, I practically jumped into her arms. "Rachel!" I screamed. "You're looking at a future bride." Her eyes widened. "No way." I held out my hand so she could see the ring. For a brief moment, her smile looked genuine. But then something changed. It was subtle. A flicker in her eyes. A stiffness in her expression. "Wow," she said slowly. "That happened fast." I laughed. 3 years isn't fast. Rachel stared at the ring for a long moment. Then she said something that made a small chill crawl down my spine. "Emily, are you sure you really know Daniel?" I blinked in confusion. "What do you mean?" She forced a smile. "Oh, nothing," she said quickly. "I'm just surprised." But the way she avoided my eyes told me she was hiding something. Still, I dismissed the thought. Rachel had always been protective of me. Maybe she was just worried. A few days later, Daniel invited me to dinner with his parents so we could announce the engagement. I was nervous but excited. His mother, Margaret, had always been polite to me, though never particularly warm. That evening, when we arrived at their large house, Daniel squeezed my hand reassuringly. "Don't worry," he whispered. "They'll be happy for us." I hoped he was right. Margaret opened the door and greeted us with a tight smile. "Daniel," she said. "You're late." Then her eyes moved to me. "And Emily." I swallowed nervously. During dinner, Daniel stood and cleared his throat. "I have something to tell everyone," he said. He took my hand. "Emily and I are getting married." Silence filled the room. Daniel's father smiled warmly. "That's wonderful news." But Margaret didn't smile. Her face slowly turned pale. Then something flashed in her eyes. Not surprise. Not happiness. Something darker. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is a mistake," she said coldly. My heart dropped. Daniel frowned. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Margaret looked directly at me. And the hatred in her eyes made my stomach twist. "You don't know what you're doing," she said quietly. Then she turned and walked out of the room, leaving the entire table in stunned silence. That night, as Daniel drove me home, I tried to convince myself it was just shock. But something deep inside me whispered that Margaret's reaction wasn't about surprise. It was about something else. Something she knew. Something no one had told me. And as I stepped out of Daniel's car, I noticed something strange. A car parked across the street. Its headlights were off. But I could see someone sitting inside, watching me. Watching my house. Then suddenly the engine started. And the car drove away. At the time, I told myself it was nothing. But I would soon learn the terrifying truth. Because that night, someone had begun watching my life very closely. And before long, all hell was about to break loose. Looking back now, the warning signs were there from the very beginning. But when you're in love, when you believe you've finally found the person God designed for you, it's easy to ignore the small cracks forming beneath the surface. 2 weeks after Daniel proposed, life should have felt like a dream. Instead, something felt off. At first, it was small things. Things that didn't seem important enough to question. Daniel started becoming distant. Not cold exactly. Not cruel. Just distracted. Before the engagement, Daniel used to call me every morning. Even if it was just for 2 minutes. "Good morning, beautiful," he would say in that warm voice that always made my heart melt. Did you sleep well? But after the proposal, those calls slowly stopped. At first, I told myself he was just busy. Daniel worked in finance, and sometimes his job demanded long hours. I respected that. I admired how hard he worked. But then the text messages started changing too. Before, he would send long messages. I can't stop thinking about you. I can't wait until you're my wife. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Now his messages were short. Busy today. Talk later. Meeting. 3 words. 2 words. Sometimes just one. One evening, I decided to surprise him. I had spent the afternoon cooking his favorite meal, grilled salmon with garlic butter, roasted potatoes, and the chocolate cake he loved so much. I even bought candles to make it special. Because that's what fiancés do, right? They celebrate love. When Daniel arrived at my apartment that evening, he smiled when he smelled the food. "Wow, someone went all out," he said, dropping his keys on the table. But something about the way he said it felt forced. I tried to ignore the feeling creeping up my spine. We sat down to eat, and for the first few minutes everything felt normal again. We laughed. We talked about wedding ideas. Venues. Guest lists. But then his phone buzzed. Daniel glanced down at the screen quickly. And something strange happened. His entire body tensed. It was subtle. Most people wouldn't have noticed. But I did. Because I knew him. "Aren't you going to answer that?" I asked casually. He shook his head too quickly. "It's nothing." But then the phone buzzed again. And again. 3 times in less than 30 seconds. Daniel flipped the phone face down on the table. My stomach tightened. "Work?" I asked. He hesitated. Just for a second. But a second is sometimes all it takes to reveal the truth. "Yeah," he said. "Work." I nodded slowly. But something inside me whispered. That wasn't the truth. The rest of the evening felt strained. Daniel kept checking the phone when he thought I wasn't looking. Every time it buzzed, he would stiffen slightly. And when I asked questions about wedding plans, his answers became vague. "We'll figure it out. There's time." But there wasn't time. Our wedding was only 3 months away. That night, after Daniel left, I sat alone in my living room staring at the engagement ring on my finger. The diamond sparkled beautifully under the light. But for some reason, it suddenly felt heavier than before. The next morning, the second warning sign arrived. It came from someone I trusted. My best friend, Rachel. Rachel and I had been inseparable since college. She knew everything about me. When I told her about the proposal, she had screamed so loudly I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "Oh my God, you're getting married." But when we met for coffee that morning, something about her felt strange. Rachel looked nervous. She kept stirring her coffee even though she hadn't added any sugar. "You look tired," I said. She forced a smile. "Just work stress." But Rachel had never been good at hiding things. I leaned forward. "What's wrong?" She shook her head quickly. "Nothing." But then she said something that made my chest tighten. "Are you sure about Daniel?" The question hung in the air between us like a dark cloud. "What do you mean?" I asked slowly. Rachel looked down at her cup. "I just want you to be careful." My heart began to beat faster. "Rachel," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "What do you know?" She hesitated again. Then she forced another smile. "Nothing. I'm probably overthinking." But I knew Rachel. And Rachel was never the type to overthink things. When we left the cafe, I hugged her goodbye. But as she walked away, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. Rachel turned around and looked at me again. And the expression on her face wasn't excitement. It wasn't happiness. It was guilt. That night, I tried to push the uneasy feeling out of my mind. But as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, one question kept echoing in my head. Why was my best friend suddenly worried about my fiancé? And why was Daniel acting like he was hiding something? I had no idea then that those two questions were connected. And that within a few weeks, my entire life was about to explode. Because the next warning sign wouldn't be subtle. It would come from the one person who hated me the most. Daniel's mother. And when she finally revealed how she truly felt about me, I realized something terrifying. This engagement had started a war I didn't even know existed. And I was the target. If betrayal had a sound, I think it would sound like silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that fills a room when someone knows something they're not telling you. Looking back now, the moment my best friend started acting strange was the moment my life quietly began to fall apart. At the time, I just didn't know it yet. Rachel had been my closest friend for almost 8 years. We met during our first semester in college when we both got lost trying to find the same lecture hall. We laughed about it afterward and ended up sitting together. From that day on, we were inseparable. She knew every secret about my life. Every heartbreak. Every fear. Every dream. She had been there the night I cried over my first real breakup. She had been there when I landed my first real job. And she had been there when I met Daniel. Which is why what happened next hurt so deeply. Because if anyone should have been happy about my engagement, it was Rachel. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something had changed the moment I told her. 3 days after our coffee meeting, Rachel invited me over to her apartment for dinner. "We need to celebrate properly," she said over the phone. "Future brides deserve a toast." Her voice sounded cheerful enough, but there was something underneath it I couldn't quite identify. Still, I went. Rachel lived in a small but cozy apartment downtown. She had decorated it with warm lighting, soft blankets, and framed photos from our college days. One of those photos sat on the shelf by the door. It was a picture of the three of us. Rachel, Daniel, and me. Taken at a church fundraiser the year Daniel and I started dating. At the time, I thought it was one of my favorite memories. Now it made my stomach twist. Rachel greeted me with a hug that felt stiff. "Congratulations again," she said. "I still can't believe you're getting married." I laughed and held up my hand so she could see the ring again. "Believe it." Rachel stared at the diamond for a moment longer than necessary. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. But something about the way she said it sounded more like observation than excitement. We sat down to eat. At first the conversation felt normal. We talked about wedding dresses, flowers, possible venues. Rachel even joked about being the maid of honor. "I expect a dramatic entrance," she said. "I'm thinking glitter, music, maybe fireworks." I laughed. "I'll consider it." But as the night went on, Rachel became quieter. She kept glancing at her phone. Every time it lit up, she would quickly turn it over. At one point, her phone buzzed loudly against the table. Rachel snatched it up so quickly that she nearly knocked over her glass. I raised an eyebrow. "Secret boyfriend?" I teased. She forced a laugh. "I wish." But she didn't show me the message. And she didn't relax after reading it. If anything, she looked more nervous. After dinner we moved to the couch. Rachel poured us both a glass of wine. She took a long sip before speaking again. "Emily." Something in her tone made me look up immediately. "Yeah?" She hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the wine glass. "Have you ever wondered if, maybe things are moving too fast with Daniel?" My stomach dropped slightly. 3 years isn't fast. "I know," she said quickly. "That's not what I meant." I studied her face. Rachel looked like someone struggling with an invisible weight. Then what do you mean? She opened her mouth. Then closed it again. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally she sighed and shook her head. Forget it. But I wasn't ready to forget it. Rachel, I said gently. If you know something, you need to tell me. She stared down at her hands. I don't know anything, she said quietly. But the way her voice trembled told a different story. Later that night, as I was about to leave, something strange happened. Rachel walked me to the door. Just as I reached for the handle, she suddenly grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight. Almost desperate. Emily, she said. I turned to face her. For a moment, it looked like she was about to say something important. Something serious. Her eyes filled with something I had never seen there before. Fear. Then suddenly, her phone rang. The sound was so sharp it made both of us jump. Rachel looked down at the screen. And the color drained from her face. She quickly turned the phone away from me. But not before I saw something. Just one word on the screen. Daniel. My heart skipped. Daniel's calling you? I asked slowly. Rachel froze. For a moment she looked like a deer caught in headlights. Then she forced a laugh. Oh, yeah. He called earlier asking about, wedding ideas. Something about that explanation felt wrong. Very wrong. Because Daniel had never mentioned calling Rachel. And Rachel had never mentioned talking to him. Not until now. Rachel declined the call. But instead of relaxing, she looked even more tense. I studied her face carefully. Rachel, I said quietly. Why is my fiancé calling you? Her eyes darted away. It's nothing. But my instinct screamed otherwise. Still, I forced myself to smile. All right, I said. Good night. Rachel hugged me again before I left. But this time the hug felt different. It felt like a goodbye. As I drove home, my mind kept replaying the moment I saw Daniel's name on Rachel's phone. Why was he calling her? Why had she looked so scared? And why did I suddenly feel like the two people I trusted most in the world were hiding something from me? I tried to push the thought away. But the uneasy feeling followed me all the way home. And when I finally pulled into my driveway, something else caught my attention. A car parked across the street. The same car I had seen days earlier. The engine was running. But the headlights were off. Someone was sitting inside. Watching my house. Watching me. And as I stepped out of my car, the driver slowly rolled down the window. Just enough for me to see a familiar face. My heart nearly stopped. Because the person watching me that night was Daniel's mother. And the look on her face told me one terrifying thing. She wasn't just watching. She was waiting. Some people hide their hatred behind polite smiles. Others don't bother hiding it at all. Daniel's mother belonged to the second category. And the night I saw her sitting in that car outside my house, watching me, I realized something that sent a chill through my entire body. Margaret wasn't just unhappy about our engagement. She was determined to stop it. I stood frozen in my driveway, my car door still open behind me. The street was quiet. A single street lamp cast a pale yellow glow across the road. Margaret's car sat directly across from my house. Her window was rolled halfway down. And she was staring at me. Not blinking. Not smiling. Just staring. My heart pounded as I slowly stepped closer. Mrs. Carter? I called out. For a moment she didn't respond. Then she sighed and pushed the car door open, stepping out. Margaret Carter was a tall woman with sharp features and perfectly styled silver hair. Even at her age, she carried herself with the kind of elegance that made people nervous around her. But tonight, that elegance felt cold. Almost threatening. I didn't expect to see you here, I said cautiously. Margaret crossed her arms. I imagine you didn't. Her voice was calm. Too calm. Were you waiting for me? I asked. A faint smile appeared on her lips. Yes. The word landed like a stone in my stomach. Why? Margaret walked slowly toward me. Her heels clicked against the pavement with each step. When she stopped in front of me, she studied my face like someone examining a piece of art they didn't particularly like. You seem like a nice girl, she said. The sentence sounded almost like a compliment. But her tone made it feel like the opposite. Thank you, I said quietly. Margaret's eyes drifted down to the ring on my finger. Her expression hardened. That ring, she said softly. You seem very proud of it. I instinctively pulled my hand closer to my chest. Daniel gave it to me, I replied. Her eyes lifted to mine again. Yes, she said slowly. He did. A long silence stretched between us. Then Margaret took a deep breath. I'm going to say something to you tonight, she said. And I suggest you listen carefully. My pulse quickened. All right. Her voice dropped lower. You should not marry my son. The words felt like a slap. I'm sorry? I stammered. You heard me. Her eyes were steady. Cold. Daniel is making a mistake. My chest tightened. Why would you say that? Margaret tilted her head slightly. Because you don't belong in our family. The bluntness of the statement left me speechless. I love Daniel, I said after a moment. That should matter. Margaret let out a short, humorless laugh. Love? She shook her head slowly. Young people always think love is enough. Isn't it? I asked. Margaret stepped closer. So close that I could see the faint lines around her eyes. Emily, she said quietly. There are things about my son you don't understand. A chill crawled up my spine. What things? Her lips pressed into a thin line. Things that would make you run away if you were smart. My heart started beating faster. Then tell me, I said. But Margaret shook her head. No. Why not? Because it's not my responsibility to clean up Daniel's mistakes. The words echoed in my ears. Daniel's mistakes. What mistakes? I pressed. Margaret's eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite read. Then she turned away. You'll find out soon enough. Panic started rising in my chest. Wait, I said quickly. If you know something, you need to tell me. Margaret stopped walking. But she didn't turn around. Instead, she said something that made my blood run cold. Tell me something first, Emily. My throat tightened. What? Margaret looked over her shoulder. Has Daniel told you everything about his past? The question hit me like a sudden gust of wind. Of course he has, I said automatically. But even as the words left my mouth, doubt crept in. Margaret noticed. And for the first time that night, she smiled. Not a friendly smile. A knowing one. I didn't think so, she said quietly. Then she walked back to her car. My mind was spinning. Mrs. Carter. I called after her. She paused with her hand on the door. You deserve to know the truth, she said. My heart pounded. Then tell me. Margaret finally turned to face me fully. The streetlight cast long shadows across her face. What if I told you, she said slowly, that this isn't the first time Daniel has proposed to someone? The words felt like the ground shifting beneath my feet. That's impossible, I whispered. But Margaret didn't look surprised by my reaction. Instead, she opened her car door. Believe whatever you want, she said. Then she added one final sentence. The sentence that would haunt me for weeks. But if I were you. She paused. I would ask your best friend Rachel what she knows. My heart slammed violently against my ribs. Rachel. Why would Rachel know anything about Daniel's past? Margaret got into the car and started the engine. The headlights suddenly illuminated the street. I shielded my eyes as she rolled down the window one last time. Good night, Emily, she said calmly. Then she drove away, leaving me standing alone in the driveway, shaking. Because in that moment I realized something terrifying. Rachel had been acting strange. Daniel had been hiding something. And his mother had just hinted at a secret no one had told me. A secret connected to my best friend. But what I didn't know then was that the truth I was about to uncover would be far worse than anything I could imagine. Because 2 nights later, I would accidentally discover something on Daniel's laptop. Something I was never meant to see. And the moment I opened that file, my entire world began to collapse. I wish I could say the truth came to me gently. That God revealed it in a peaceful moment of prayer, or through a quiet whisper in my spirit. But the truth exploded into my life like thunder. And when it did, nothing was ever the same again. It started on a rainy Tuesday evening. Daniel had left for what he called an emergency meeting. That had become normal lately. Meetings. Phone calls. Sudden trips. At first, I told myself it was just work. After all, Daniel was building his company and had always been ambitious. But something in my spirit felt unsettled. You know that feeling when everything looks normal, but deep inside you feel like something is wrong? That was how I felt every single day. I tried to distract myself by cleaning the house. The rain tapped softly against the windows as I moved through the living room, dusting shelves and straightening pillows. Then I walked into Daniel's office. He usually kept it locked. But that night, the door was slightly open. I paused. A strange feeling settled in my chest. Why would he leave it open? Daniel was very protective of his office. Even when I needed a pen, he would insist on getting it himself. But tonight the room stood there, quiet and waiting. I stepped inside slowly. The air smelled like paper and cologne. Stacks of files were neatly arranged across the desk. His laptop sat closed beside a black leather folder I had never seen before. At first, I didn't plan to look through anything. I just wanted to tidy up. But then something caught my eye. A piece of paper sticking slightly out of the leather folder. And on the top corner, I saw my name. My heart skipped. Why would my name be inside a file in his office? I hesitated. A voice inside me whispered, "Leave it alone." But another voice, louder and urgent, said, "You need to see this." My hands trembled as I pulled the paper out. And the moment my eyes landed on the words, the room felt like it was spinning. At the top of the page were bold letters. Legal agreement, confidential. Below it were 2 names. Daniel Carter. And mine. My chest tightened. Why was there a legal agreement involving me? I kept reading. And every word felt like a knife piercing my heart. Because the document said something that made my knees weak. It described our marriage. Not as love. Not as a union. But as a contract. I stared at the page, hoping I had misunderstood. But the words were painfully clear. The document stated that Daniel would marry me for a period of 3 years. In exchange, he would gain financial access to a family inheritance connected to my late father's estate. My hand started shaking violently. No. No, this couldn't be real. Daniel loved me. He proposed to me with tears in his eyes. He told me God brought us together. He promised forever. So why was there a contract describing our marriage like a business deal? My heart pounded as I flipped through the rest of the papers. And what I saw made the betrayal even worse. There were signatures. legal stamps, bank documents, property papers. And attached to the file was a handwritten note. The handwriting was not Daniel's. It belonged to someone else. Someone I recognized immediately. His mother. The note read, "Everything is moving according to plan. Once the marriage is finalized, the estate access will be secured. Do not lose focus. Remember why this must be done." I felt like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. So it was true. His mother knew. She wasn't just against me. She was part of this plan. My mind replayed every moment with Daniel. Every smile. Every promise. Every prayer we had prayed together. Was it all fake? Was I just a pawn in a carefully planned scheme? Tears blurred my vision as I sat down slowly in his chair. I could hear the rain pounding harder outside. And inside my heart, a storm had begun. But then something even more disturbing caught my eye. Another folder. This one labeled medical records. I frowned. Why would Daniel keep medical records in his office? Curiosity pushed me to open it. And the moment I saw the name on the document, my blood ran cold. Because the records belonged to me. My breath stopped. I flipped through the pages quickly. Hospital forms. Test results. Doctor reports. But the most terrifying part was the highlighted diagnosis. A medical condition I had never been told about. The report stated that I had a serious health issue that could affect my ability to have children. My hand started trembling again. This was impossible. I had never received these results. I had never even taken these tests. So how did Daniel have them? And why was he hiding them from me? Suddenly, everything began to make sense. His mother's strange comments about grandchildren. Daniel's sudden insistence that we take our time before starting a family. The strange appointments he kept encouraging me to attend. My heart sank as a terrible realization formed in my mind. What if? What if they were planning something much bigger than a contract marriage? What if my health, my future, was part of their plan too? Tears rolled down my cheeks as I whispered one desperate prayer. God, what is happening to my life? And deep inside my spirit, I felt something I had never felt before. A warning. A quiet voice saying, "The truth is deeper than you think." I quickly gathered the papers and placed them back exactly how I found them. Because one thing was clear. Daniel could never know I had seen those documents. Not yet. Not until I understood the full truth. But as I walked out of his office, one terrifying thought echoed in my mind. If my marriage was a contract. If his mother was secretly controlling everything. If my medical records were being hidden from me. Then the man I married might not just be hiding a secret. He might be hiding a plan that could destroy my life. And I had no idea that the next discovery would be even worse. Because the person who would expose the next truth was someone I never expected. Fire. That night, I barely slept. The rain had stopped hours ago, but inside my heart the storm was still raging. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same thing again and again. The contract. My name. Daniel's signature. And his mother's handwriting. The man I had trusted with my life, the man I believed God had sent to me, might have married me for a plan. I kept asking myself the same painful question. Was any of it real? The clock on the wall showed 11:47 p.m. when I heard the front door open. Daniel was back. I quickly wiped my tears and pretended to be asleep on the couch. His footsteps were slow and heavy as he walked into the living room. For a moment, I thought he would wake me. But he didn't. Instead, he stood there quietly, watching me. I could feel his eyes on me even though mine were closed. Then he sighed softly. "Poor girl," he murmured under his breath. My heart tightened. Poor girl? What did that mean? A few minutes later, he walked down the hallway toward his office. I waited until the door shut before opening my eyes. Something about the way he spoke had disturbed me deeply. Not with love. Not with concern. But with pity. The kind of pity someone has for a person who doesn't know the truth. I tried to convince myself to stay where I was. To ignore everything. To pretend my life wasn't falling apart. But something inside me refused to stay quiet. So I stood up slowly. And walked down the hallway. The light under Daniel's office door glowed faintly. I was about to turn away when I heard something unexpected. His voice. But he wasn't alone. He was on the phone. I froze. And then I heard the voice on the other end. A voice I recognized immediately. His mother. My stomach dropped. Why were they talking this late? And why did Daniel sound nervous? I didn't mean to eavesdrop. But the moment I heard the next sentence, my body refused to move. "Mom," Daniel whispered sharply, "you promised this would stay under control." There was a pause. Then his mother's cold voice came through the speaker. "You're panicking for nothing." My chest tightened. Panicking? About what? Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "I'm telling you something has changed," he said. "She's starting to ask questions." My heart stopped. They were talking about me. His mother laughed softly. "Of course she is," she said. "Women always get curious eventually." Daniel's voice dropped lower. "But what if she finds out about the reports?" My breath caught in my throat. The medical reports. So he knew about them. And he was hiding them from me. His mother's tone turned sharp. "She won't find out unless you lose your nerve," she said. Daniel sounded uneasy. "I don't like this anymore, Mom." There was silence for a few seconds. Then she spoke again, colder than before. "You don't like it?" she repeated. "Daniel, this marriage is the only way to secure that estate." My heart pounded harder. So it was true. Everything revolved around my father's inheritance. Daniel sighed. "I know. But she's not just some stranger anymore." Those words hit me like a punch to the chest. Not just some stranger anymore. So in the beginning, that's all I had been to him. His mother's voice became icy. "Don't start developing feelings now. That would ruin everything." My hands trembled against the wall. Feelings? So even the possibility of Daniel loving me was considered a problem to them. Daniel lowered his voice. "There's something else you should know." "What?" "The doctor called today." My heart began racing again. "The latest test results came in," Daniel continued. "And?" There was a long pause. Then Daniel said the words that shattered my world. "The condition is worse than we thought." I covered my mouth to stop myself from gasping. Condition? Were they still talking about my health? His mother sounded almost satisfied. "Well," she said calmly, "that actually works in our favor." My knees nearly gave out beneath me. Works in their favor? What kind of people were they? Daniel sounded uncomfortable. "I don't think we should go that far." Her voice suddenly turned dangerous. "You don't have a choice." Silence filled the room again. Then she delivered the sentence that made my blood run cold. "Once the inheritance is transferred, you can divorce her." My entire body froze. "Divorce me?" Daniel spoke slowly. "And what about the medical situation?" His mother's reply came without hesitation. "She'll never prove anything." My heart felt like it was breaking inside my chest. They had planned everything. The marriage. The contract. Even my health. Daniel sounded conflicted. "She trusts me." His mother's response was brutal. "That's exactly why this plan works." Tears streamed silently down my face. In that moment, something inside me shattered. The man I loved. The family I thought I had joined. The future I had dreamed about. It had all been built on deception. Then Daniel said something that made my heart ache even more. I didn't think she would be this kind. For a moment, just a moment. I thought maybe he was regretting everything. But his mother quickly shut that down. Kindness doesn't matter, she said coldly. Money does. I couldn't listen anymore. My legs felt weak as I slowly stepped away from the door. The hallway felt darker than ever before. And the house that once felt like my home now felt like a prison. I returned to the couch quietly. My heart was pounding so loudly I thought they might hear it. I stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours. And only one thought echoed through my mind. My marriage was a lie. But what terrified me even more was something else. They had a plan. And I was standing right in the middle of it. But what I didn't know that night was that heaven had already begun to move on my behalf. Because the next person who would enter my life would bring the truth that would change everything. And expose a secret even Daniel didn't know. The next morning, I woke up feeling like a stranger in my own life. The house was quiet. Too quiet. For a moment, I stared at the ceiling, hoping everything I heard the night before had been a nightmare. But the memories came rushing back like a flood. Daniel's voice. His mother's cold laughter. The words that shattered everything. Once the inheritance is transferred, you can divorce her. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I forced them back. No. I couldn't break down now. Not yet. If they had planned something this carefully, then I needed to be smarter. I needed to know the truth. All of it. Daniel was already dressed for work when I walked into the kitchen. He looked up and smiled like everything was normal. Like my life hadn't just been exposed as a lie. Good morning, he said warmly. That smile used to make my heart melt. Now it felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I forced a weak smile. Morning. He walked over and kissed my forehead. Did you sleep well? For a moment, I almost laughed. Sleep? After hearing the man I loved plan my future behind my back. But I simply nodded. Yes. Daniel studied my face for a second, as if trying to read my thoughts. Then he grabbed his car keys. I might be late tonight, he said. There are a few things I need to handle. Of course there were. More secrets. More lies. Okay, I replied quietly. He left a few minutes later. And the moment the door closed, I finally let the tears fall. But my breakdown didn't last long. Because something else started bothering me. The medical reports. Daniel had mentioned a doctor calling about test results. But I had never taken those tests. So how did those records exist? And why were they using them against me? The more I thought about it, the more uneasy I felt. Then suddenly, something else came back to my memory. A voicemail. A few days earlier, I had received a call from a hospital number. I hadn't answered because I didn't recognize it. The voicemail had been short and strange. The woman's voice sounded nervous. She had said, "Hello, this message is for, Miss Carter. Please call me back regarding your medical file. It's important." At the time, I assumed it was a mistake. But now my heart was pounding. What if it wasn't a mistake? My hands trembled as I dialed the number. The phone rang 3 times. Then someone answered. Mercy Medical Center. How can I help you? My voice felt dry. Hello. I received a voicemail from this number. Your name, please? I hesitated. Then I said it. This is Amelia Carter. There was a sudden pause on the other end. Then the woman's voice returned, quieter this time. Miss Carter? Yes. Another pause. Then she said something that made my stomach tighten. I've been trying to reach you. Why? I asked slowly. The woman hesitated. Can you come to the hospital today? She asked. My heart started racing. Is something wrong? There was a long silence. Then she said softly. There's something you need to see in person. An hour later, I was sitting in a small consultation room at the hospital. The walls were white. The air smelled like disinfectant. My hands felt cold as I waited. A few minutes later, the door opened. A woman in her early 40s walked in wearing a white coat. Her name badge read, Dr. Evelyn Brooks. She looked at me carefully, almost as if she was studying my face. Miss Carter? She asked gently. Yes. She closed the door behind her. Then sat down across from me. For a moment, she didn't speak. And that silence made my heart pound even harder. Finally, she sighed. I'm going to ask you something, she said. Okay. Her eyes locked onto mine. Did you personally authorize someone to access your medical records? My mind froze. No, I said immediately. Her expression darkened. That's what I was afraid of. My pulse began racing. What do you mean? Dr. Brooks reached into a folder and pulled out a document. She slid it across the table toward me. Take a look at this. My hand shook as I read it. It was a medical authorization form, allowing someone to access my private medical records. And the name listed under authorized representative was Daniel Carter. My throat tightened. But I never signed this. Dr. Brooks nodded slowly. I know. My heart skipped. You know? She leaned forward. Because the signature doesn't match the one on file from your previous medical visits. The room suddenly felt colder. So you're saying? I whispered. Yes, she said quietly. It appears your signature was forged. My head began spinning. Daniel had access to my records. Through a forged document. But why? What was he looking for? Dr. Brooks opened another file. Now there's something else you need to know. My heart felt like it might explode. What? She turned the file toward me. These are the test results your husband requested. I stared at the pages. Then at her. But I never took these tests. She nodded again. I'm aware. My chest tightened. Then how do they exist? Dr. Brooks hesitated before answering. Then she said the words that made my entire body go numb. They were submitted under your name. But they weren't taken by you. The room fell completely silent. My voice barely came out. Then, whose results are these? Dr. Brooks looked deeply troubled. We're still investigating that. My mind felt like it was collapsing under the weight of everything. The forged signature. The fake test results. The secret plan I overheard. Something far darker was happening. Something bigger than just a contract marriage. Dr. Brooks lowered her voice. I probably shouldn't be telling you this, she said carefully. But something about this situation doesn't feel right. My heart pounded. What are you saying? She leaned closer. Someone is manipulating your medical records. A chill ran through my spine. But why? Her answer came slowly. I don't know yet. Then she added something even more alarming. But whoever did this had help from someone inside the hospital. I felt like the ground beneath me had disappeared. If Daniel and his mother were capable of forging documents and manipulating hospital records, then how far were they willing to go? Dr. Brooks gently closed the file. Miss Carter, she said softly. You need to be very careful. My voice trembled. Why? Her eyes were filled with concern. Because if someone is willing to alter medical records. She paused. Then finished the sentence quietly. They might be capable of much worse. As I walked out of the hospital that afternoon, the sunlight felt too bright. My world had completely changed. My husband had forged my signature. Fake medical reports existed under my name. And someone inside the hospital was helping him. But deep inside my spirit, I felt something else rising. Not fear. Not anymore. Determination. Because now I knew something Daniel didn't. The truth was starting to surface. And the deeper I looked, the more dangerous his secrets would become. But the next discovery would shake me even more. Because someone close to Daniel, someone I had never suspected, was about to reveal the darkest part of their plan. I didn't go straight home after leaving the hospital. I couldn't. My mind was spinning too fast. The city moved around me like a blur as I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel with shaking hands. Daniel had forged my signature. Someone inside the hospital had helped manipulate medical records under my name. And worst of all, the test results claiming I had a serious condition weren't even mine. So whose were they? And why would anyone go to such lengths to create fake reports about my health? The deeper I thought about it, the more terrifying the possibilities became. But one thing was clear. I needed answers. Just as I was about to start the car, my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. For a moment, I hesitated. Then I answered. Hello? There was silence for a second. Then a low voice spoke. Miss Carter? Yes, who is this? I can't give you my name, the voice replied quickly. My heart skipped. But I work at the hospital. My pulse immediately began racing. Another hospital employee? I know about the records, the person continued quietly. My stomach tightened. What records? The ones that were submitted under your name. A chill ran through my body. How do you know about that? The voice lowered even further. Because I saw the file. My hands tightened around the phone. And? There was a pause. Then the stranger said something that made my blood run cold. The results didn't belong to you. I know that, I whispered. No, the voice corrected gently. You don't understand. My heart began pounding harder. What do you mean? The person hesitated before answering. Then the truth came out slowly. The test results belong to someone in your husband's family. My mind froze. What? I shouldn't be telling you this, the voice said nervously. But when I saw the names connected to the file, something didn't feel right. I could barely breathe. Whose results are they? I asked. There was a long pause on the line. Then the answer came. His mother's. Everything inside me went silent. Daniel's mother? The results claiming I had a medical condition that could prevent me from having children were actually hers? My voice trembled. Are you sure? Yes, the voice replied. I checked the internal database. The original patient ID connected to those results belongs to Margaret Carter, Daniel's mother. The woman who constantly made cruel comments about grandchildren. The woman who had treated me like I was never good enough. The woman who secretly helped plan my marriage as a contract. I felt sick. So they switched the records? I asked quietly. Yes. But why? The answer came quickly. Because someone wanted you to believe the condition was yours. My chest tightened. Suddenly, everything started making sense. The pressure about children. The strange medical appointments. The hidden reports. They weren't just trying to manipulate my inheritance. They were trying to create a false narrative about my health. But there's something even stranger, the voice continued. My heart dropped. What? The person who authorized the record change wasn't your husband. I froze. Then who? The voice hesitated. Then said the name that made my hands start shaking again. Margaret Carter. Daniel's mother had personally authorized the change. She had manipulated the hospital records herself. That meant this plan wasn't just something Daniel was involved in. It was something she was controlling. My thoughts raced. But why would she do that? I asked. The voice answered quietly. There are only two reasons someone would falsify medical reports like that. What reasons? The person hesitated before speaking again. Either they want to discredit someone. My stomach tightened. Or they're preparing a legal case. A legal case? My mind raced back to the contract I found in Daniel's office. 3-year marriage. Access to inheritance. Divorce afterward. Suddenly, the horrifying truth began forming in my mind. What if, I whispered slowly. What if she planned to use those records in court? The voice on the phone went silent. Then responded softly. That's exactly what I was thinking. My chest felt heavy. If the fake reports showed I couldn't have children, then Daniel could later claim the marriage failed because of me. They could blame my health condition and walk away with everything they had gained. But something still didn't make sense. Why use her own test results? I asked. The voice answered quietly. Because those were the only results severe enough to support the story. My stomach twisted. Daniel's mother was sick. And instead of dealing with her own condition, she had used it to destroy someone else's life. Mine. Tears burned in my eyes. But this time they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of anger. Because for the first time I understood the full depth of the deception. Before hanging up, the voice spoke again. There's one more thing you should know. My heart skipped. What? The hospital audit team is starting to review the files. My pulse jumped. Why? Because the record change triggered a security flag. A security flag. Meaning someone had already noticed the manipulation. Meaning the truth might come out. You didn't hear this from me, the voice said quickly. But if there's going to be an investigation, it could expose everything. My heart began pounding again. Everything. The forged signatures. The fake medical reports. The hidden plan. The call ended a moment later. And I sat there in complete silence. The truth was finally coming into the light. But the more the truth appeared, the more dangerous my situation became. Because if Daniel and his mother realized I knew what they had done, there was no telling what they might do next. But that night something unexpected would happen. Something that would change the entire story. Because the man who had married me as part of a plan was about to face a truth he never expected. And for the first time, Daniel would begin to realize that the woman he tried to deceive was the woman he might actually be falling in love with. That evening, when Daniel came home, something about him felt different. I noticed it the moment he walked through the door. He looked tired. Not just physically tired, but emotionally drained. His tie was loose, and his eyes seemed heavy with thoughts he wasn't ready to share. For a moment, we simply stood there in silence. The air between us felt strange. Heavy. Like two people pretending nothing was wrong while standing on the edge of a cliff. Hey, he finally said softly. Hey, I replied. I forced my voice to sound normal. After everything I had discovered that day, acting normal felt like the hardest thing I had ever done. Daniel placed his keys on the table and looked around the room. Did you go out today? He asked. My heart skipped. Was he testing me? I nodded calmly. Yes, just ran a few errands. That wasn't exactly a lie. But it definitely wasn't the full truth. He studied my face for a moment. Then he sighed and sat down on the couch. For the first time in weeks, Daniel looked conflicted. Amelia, he said quietly. Yes? There's something I've been thinking about. My chest tightened. Was he about to confess? Did he know that I knew? But instead, he asked something unexpected. Are you happy? The question caught me off guard. Happy? I didn't know how to answer that anymore. Once upon a time I would have said yes without hesitation. But now my life felt like a carefully constructed lie. Still, I nodded slowly. I think so. Daniel leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. Then he laughed softly to himself. You know, when I first met you, I thought you were too good to be real. His words made my heart ache. Because I knew the truth behind them. In the beginning, I had only been part of his plan. But something in his voice sounded different tonight. Almost sincere. You're kind to everyone, he continued. Even people who don't deserve it. I swallowed hard. If only he knew how much I had discovered about him and his family. You always believe the best in people, he said. And I used to think that was naive. He paused. Then whispered something I wasn't expecting. But now I think it's beautiful. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Daniel ran a hand over his face. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. My heart started beating faster. About what? About the plan? About me? You deserve someone who's completely honest with you, he said quietly. My chest tightened painfully. Yes. Yes, I did. But he still hadn't told me the truth. Daniel suddenly stood up and walked toward the window. The room was dimly lit, and the city lights flickered through the glass. You know something strange? He said softly. What? I didn't expect you to change my life. His words hung in the air between us. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw something in his eyes. Regret. I thought I had everything under control, he continued. But then you came into my life. He turned to look at me. And now nothing feels simple anymore. My heart was pounding. Was he realizing what he had done? Was he finally seeing the damage his actions had caused? Daniel shook his head slowly. I don't know when it happened, he admitted. But somewhere along the way. His voice dropped almost to a whisper. I started caring about you more than I was supposed to. The words struck me like lightning. More than he was supposed to? So the plan had rules. Boundaries. Limits. And loving me had never been part of it, but before I could respond, his phone suddenly rang. The moment he saw the caller ID, his entire expression changed. His jaw tightened. His shoulders stiffened. I didn't need to ask who it was. I already knew. His mother. Danielle stepped into the hallway to answer the call. But even from the living room, I could hear her voice through the phone. Sharp. Cold. Controlled. Daniel, she said firmly, we need to talk. And the conversation that followed would reveal something even more terrifying than before. I tried not to listen. I really did. But the moment I heard Margaret's voice through Daniel's phone, my body froze. She sounded angry. Very angry. What do you mean you're hesitating? She snapped. Daniel's voice was low. I'm not hesitating. Yes, you are, she replied sharply. I can hear it in your voice. I slowly moved closer to the hallway without making any noise. My heart was pounding so loudly I was afraid they might hear it. Then Margaret said something that made my blood run cold. You're forgetting why this marriage exists. Daniel exhaled heavily. I haven't forgotten. Then stop acting like you have, she said. There was a brief silence. Then she continued speaking. And you need to move faster. Daniel sounded confused. Move faster with what? Margaret's next words were chilling. With the divorce preparations. My entire body went still. Divorce. They were already planning it. Daniel sounded uneasy. Mom, we're not even close to the 3-year mark yet. I know that, she replied impatiently. But circumstances have changed. What circumstances? Her voice dropped lower. The hospital investigation. My heart skipped. So she knew. She knew the records were being reviewed. If the hospital audit exposes the record changes, she continued, it could complicate everything. Daniel's voice grew tense. So what are you suggesting? Margaret answered without hesitation. You need to end the marriage sooner. My chest tightened painfully. End the marriage sooner? After everything they had already done? But then she said something even worse. You'll file the divorce claiming emotional distress. Daniel sounded shocked. Emotional distress? Yes, she said calmly. You'll say Amelia lied about her medical condition. My hands began shaking. They were planning to blame me. You'll claim she deceived you about her health before the marriage, Margaret continued. That would legally protect your claim to the estate assets. Daniel was silent for several seconds. Then he spoke slowly. That's extreme. Her voice hardened immediately. Do you want to lose everything? No. Then follow the plan. My heart felt like it was breaking all over again. This woman wasn't just manipulative. She was ruthless. But then Daniel said something unexpected. I'm not sure I can do that. There was a dangerous pause on the line. What did you say? I said I'm not sure. Margaret's voice turned icy. You're getting attached. No, Daniel replied quickly. You are, she insisted. And that's exactly what I warned you about. Silence filled the hallway. Then she delivered the most cruel sentence yet. If Amelia becomes a problem. My stomach tightened. We'll deal with her. Daniel sounded alarmed. What does that mean? Margaret's response was disturbingly calm. It means the plan must succeed. No matter what. My breath caught in my throat. No matter what? What exactly was she willing to do? Finally, Daniel ended the call. When he returned to the living room, his face looked pale. For a moment, he simply stood there staring at me. And something in his eyes had changed. Fear. Conflict. Guilt. Because for the first time, Daniel was starting to realize something terrifying. The plan he had helped create was now spiraling into something even he couldn't control. And the next chapter would reveal something that would shock everyone. Because soon, Daniel would discover a truth his mother had been hiding from him. A truth that would turn the entire plan against her. The night after Daniel's tense phone call with his mother, the house felt unusually quiet. Too quiet. Daniel barely spoke during dinner. He pushed his food around his plate, lost in thought. I watched him carefully. Something was clearly bothering him. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I sensed that he might finally be questioning everything his mother had been pushing him to do. Finally, he sighed and put his fork down. Amelia, he said slowly. Yes? There's something I need to figure out. My heart skipped. What do you mean? He rubbed his temples like someone carrying a heavy burden. I need to check something about the hospital records. My pulse jumped. So he was suspicious too. The next morning, Daniel left the house earlier than usual. He didn't explain where he was going. But I had a feeling I knew. The hospital. For hours, I waited anxiously at home, wondering what he might discover. Then around mid-afternoon, the front door suddenly opened. Daniel walked in quickly. And the moment I saw his face, I knew something had changed. He looked stunned. Almost shaken. Daniel? I asked carefully. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked into the living room and sat down slowly. Then he looked up at me with eyes filled with disbelief. Amelia. I just found out something about my mother. My chest tightened. What? His voice was quiet but heavy. She's been lying to me. I sat down across from him. What kind of lie? Daniel hesitated, as if the words themselves were hard to say. For years, my mother told me that she was perfectly healthy. I felt a chill run down my spine. But today I spoke with one of the doctors at the hospital. My heart began pounding. And? He swallowed hard. She's not healthy. My mind raced. Of course she wasn't. Her medical results had been switched with mine. But Daniel still didn't know that part yet. What did the doctor say? I asked. Daniel looked down at his hands. Then he whispered something that completely changed the direction of everything. She's been hiding a serious illness for years. The room went silent. What illness? I asked softly. Daniel took a deep breath. A genetic condition. My chest tightened. And the doctor told me something else. What? His eyes lifted slowly to meet mine. It's hereditary. A wave of realization washed over me. If the illness was hereditary, then Daniel himself could be at risk. And suddenly I understood why Margaret had gone to such extreme lengths to hide the truth. Daniel leaned back in his chair. All this time she made comments about you having health problems. His voice trembled slightly. But now I'm starting to think. He didn't finish the sentence. But I already knew what he was about to say. The problem had never been me. It had always been her. Daniel stood up and began pacing the room. She pushed me to rush the marriage, he continued. She insisted we needed legal access to your father's estate. His expression darkened. And now I'm starting to realize why. I watched him carefully. Daniel was finally putting the pieces together. She needed financial security, he said quietly. For medical treatment. Everything suddenly made sense. The inheritance. The contract. The manipulation. Margaret hadn't just been greedy. She had been desperate. But instead of being honest, she had built an entire scheme around lies. Daniel looked devastated. I trusted her, he whispered. My heart softened slightly. For the first time, he looked like a man realizing he had been used. Just like I had. But the next chapter of this story would reveal something even more powerful. Because while Margaret had tried to manipulate medical reports to destroy my future, God was about to turn this situation around in a way none of us expected. 2 days later, I received another call from the hospital. This time it was Dr. Brooks again. Her voice sounded serious. Amelia, we need you to come in. My heart immediately started racing. Is something wrong? No, she said carefully. In fact, something very important has happened. An hour later, I was sitting in the same consultation room as before. Dr. Brooks entered carrying a thick folder. But this time her expression was different. She looked relieved. Amelia, she began gently. The hospital investigation has been completed. My pulse jumped. And? She placed the folder on the table. The audit confirmed that your medical records were falsified. I nodded slowly. I suspected that. But there's more, she said. She opened the folder and pulled out several documents. These are your actual medical test results. My breath caught. My real results? Yes. She slid the papers toward me. I stared at them nervously. Part of me was terrified to read them. After everything that had happened, I didn't know what to expect. Finally, I gathered my courage and looked at the report. And the moment I read the words on the page, tears filled my eyes. All results, normal. No illness. No fertility issues. No medical condition. My voice trembled. So, there's nothing wrong with me? Dr. Brooks smiled warmly. Nothing at all. The weight that had been sitting on my chest for weeks suddenly lifted. The lies. The manipulation. The false diagnosis. None of it was real. Dr. Brooks leaned forward. There's something else you should know. My heart skipped again. What? The hospital has reported the falsification of records to the medical board. A chill ran down my spine. That means there will be legal consequences for anyone involved. My mind immediately went to Margaret. Her plan was collapsing. The truth was coming out. Dr. Brooks smiled gently. Amelia, sometimes the truth has a way of fighting its way to the surface. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Because deep in my heart, I knew something else was happening too. This wasn't just an investigation. It felt like divine intervention. The lies were being exposed. The truth was rising. And the plan that was meant to destroy my life was beginning to fall apart. But the biggest moment was still ahead. Because soon, everything would come to light in the most dramatic place possible. A courtroom. Where the lies, the contract, and the manipulated medical records would all be revealed. And when the truth finally exploded into the open, it would become a moment of God's perfect justice. The day of the court hearing arrived faster than I expected. Standing outside the courthouse, I felt a mixture of emotions swirling inside me: fear, anger, sadness, and something else I hadn't felt in a long time. Strength. For weeks, my life had been manipulated by lies, secret plans, and deception. But now the truth was about to be revealed. And there was nothing Margaret Carter could do to stop it. The courtroom was already filled when I walked in. Lawyers shuffled papers. People whispered quietly. The air was thick with tension. At the front of the room sat Margaret Carter. Her posture was as confident as ever. But when our eyes met, I noticed something different. For the first time, she looked nervous. Daniel sat beside her. He looked exhausted. The confident man who once controlled every situation now looked like someone carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. When he saw me enter, his eyes softened. But he quickly looked away. The judge entered the courtroom, and everyone stood. Court is now in session. My heart began pounding harder. This was it. The moment everything would be revealed. Margaret's lawyer spoke first. He stood confidently and addressed the judge. Your Honor, my client's son entered into a marriage under false pretenses. He was misled regarding significant medical information that directly impacted the foundation of the marriage. My stomach tightened. They were still trying to blame me. The lawyer continued smoothly. My client's family has endured emotional distress due to this deception. Deception. The word echoed through the courtroom like a lie begging to be exposed. Then my lawyer stood up. Calm. Prepared. And holding a thick stack of documents. Your Honor, he began, the claim of deception is not only false, it is part of a carefully planned scheme. The courtroom fell silent. He placed several documents on the evidence table. These are the official hospital audit results. Margaret's confidence began to fade. And these results confirm that medical records belonging to Margaret Carter were deliberately transferred into the medical file of Amelia Carter. Gasps spread across the courtroom. Margaret's lawyer quickly stood. Objection. But the judge raised a hand. Overruled. Continue. My lawyer continued speaking clearly. The investigation also confirmed that the authorization used to access Amelia Carter's medical records contained a forged signature. The judge leaned forward. Who authorized the falsification? My lawyer pointed directly toward Margaret. The authorization came from Margaret Carter herself. The courtroom erupted with whispers. Margaret's face turned pale. For the first time since I met her, she looked truly cornered. Then the final piece of evidence was presented. The contract. The very document I had discovered in Daniel's office. The agreement proving the marriage had been planned for financial gain. The judge looked through the papers carefully. Then his voice filled the room. This document indicates the marriage was entered into as part of a financial strategy involving estate access. Margaret's lawyer had no response. The truth was undeniable. But then something unexpected happened. Daniel slowly stood up. The entire courtroom turned toward him. Daniel's hands trembled slightly as he stepped forward. His lawyer tried to stop him. "Daniel, sit down." But he shook his head. "No." His voice echoed through the courtroom. "I need to speak." The judge studied him carefully. "You understand you are speaking under oath?" "Yes, Your Honor." Daniel took a deep breath. Then he looked directly at me. Pain filled his eyes. "My mother planned the entire marriage," he said quietly. Gasps spread across the courtroom. "She convinced me that marrying Amelia would secure access to her father's estate." His voice cracked slightly. "And I agreed." Tears burned behind my eyes as he continued. "At first, I treated it like a business arrangement. The truth hurt, but at least it was finally being spoken." "But things changed," he said. The courtroom was completely silent. Daniel looked at me again. "Somewhere along the way, I fell in love with her." My heart skipped. "I didn't expect that to happen," he admitted. "But it did." He turned toward the judge. "My mother falsified the medical records because she needed to hide her own illness." Margaret's face twisted with anger. But Daniel kept speaking. "She wanted to make it look like Amelia had a medical condition so we could blame her when the marriage ended." The judge's expression hardened. "And did you participate in the falsification?" Daniel lowered his head. "I signed the authorization form." The courtroom fell silent again. "But I didn't know the medical results belonged to my mother," he continued. "When I discovered the truth, I realized how far things had gone." He turned toward me one last time. "Amelia, I'm sorry." The apology was simple. But it carried the weight of everything that had happened. A few weeks later, the court issued its final ruling. Margaret Carter was charged with medical fraud and document falsification. The contract marriage agreement was declared legally invalid. And every claim against me was completely dismissed. But the greatest victory wasn't the legal outcome. It was the peace that returned to my life. The lies had been exposed. The manipulation had failed. And the plan designed to destroy me had completely collapsed. One evening, as I sat quietly in my new apartment, sunlight streamed through the window. For the first time in months, my heart felt calm. God had seen everything. Every lie. Every betrayal. Every terror. And in the end, truth had prevailed. A gentle knock sounded on the door. When I opened it, Daniel stood there. He looked different now. Humbled. Changed. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness," he said quietly. "I just wanted you to know, you were the best thing that ever happened to me." I studied him for a moment. Then I nodded. Because sometimes forgiveness doesn't mean going back. Sometimes it simply means moving forward in peace. Daniel walked away slowly. And as I closed the door, I whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude. Because what my enemies meant for evil, God had turned into something powerful. Their plan had been betrayal. But the outcome became something greater. God's perfect justice. And the reminder that no matter how carefully evil is planned, truth will always rise. And when it does, no lie can stand against it.